The great chamber of the Galactic Council was filled with noise. Representatives from 40 different species talked over each other. Their voices mixed together like a storm. But in the back of the room, in the smallest seats, the human delegates sat in perfect stillness. Ambassador Elena Vasquez watched the chaos with tired eyes. She had been doing this job for 12 years. 12 years of raising her hand. 12 years of waiting to speak. 12 years of being ignored. Today was supposed to be different. Today, humanity had brought a proposal to save a dying world. The planet was called Vareth 6, and its people were starving. Their crops had failed. Their water was poisoned. They had sent desperate messages to the council for 3 years. No one had answered. No one except the humans. Elena had spent 6 months preparing this proposal. Her team had worked without sleep. They had found a way to save Vareth 6. It would cost money, yes. It would require ships and medicine and food. But it could be done. The humans had proven it could be done. She stood up to present the plan. She cleared her throat. She began to speak. High Counselor Thyron of the Valkyrie did not even look at her. He was talking to the Thalassian delegate about trade taxes. His voice was loud and confident. He did not notice that a human was trying to speak. Elena spoke louder. The Korvax representatives started their own conversation. The noise in the chamber grew. Elena's voice disappeared into it like a stone dropped into a river. She stopped speaking. She looked around the room. Not a single alien face was turned toward her. Not one. They had not heard a word. This had happened before. It happened almost every time. Humans were the youngest species in the council. They had only been members for 47 years. 2 races that lived for centuries. 47 years was nothing. Humans were children to them. Children who should sit quietly and learn from their elders. Elena sat back down. Her assistant, a young man named Marcus, leaned toward her. Should we try again? He whispered. Before Elena could answer, High Counselor Thyron called for a vote. The matter of Vareth 6 had come up on the schedule, but no one had actually discussed it. No one had heard the human proposal. The motion to redirect aid resources to Vareth 6, Thyron announced. All in favor? Elena raised her hand. So did the other 7 human delegates. 8 hands out of 300. All opposed? A sea of hands went up. Claws and tentacles and appendages of every shape. The vote was not even close. Motion denied, Thrawn said. He was already looking at his notes for the next topic. The Council has determined that Vareth 6 is economically insignificant. Resources will not be allocated at this time. Economically insignificant. 3 million people were starving to death, and those were the words the Council used. Economically insignificant? Elena felt something break inside her. It was not anger. Anger was too hot too fast. This was something colder. Something that had been building for 12 years. For 47 years, for every moment that humanity had tried to speak and been met with silence, her communication device buzzed softly. A message from Earth, from the United Government itself. She read the words on the small screen, and her heart began to beat faster. They don't hear us when we speak. Let them hear us when we don't. She read it again. Then she understood. She looked at Marcus. She looked at the other human delegates. They had all received the same message. Their faces were pale, but determined. Elena stood up slowly. The chamber was still full of noise. No one noticed her. No one ever noticed her. She reached up to her ear and removed her translation device. The alien voices around her became meaningless sounds. She placed the small device on her desk with a soft click. Then she walked toward the door. She did not speak. She did not explain. She did not ask permission or make a scene. She simply walked. Behind her, one by one, the other human delegates did the same. They removed their translation devices. They gathered their belongings. They stood and followed their ambassador toward the exit. A young alien named Corys was the first to notice. He worked in the support staff, helping to manage the chamber's technical systems. He had worked alongside humans for years. He liked them. They were kind to him when others were not. He watched Alina walk past him. Her face was calm. Too calm. There was something final in her eyes. "Ambassador?" he called out. "Is everything all right?" She did not answer. She did not even look at him. She just kept walking. The human delegates filed out of the chamber in a perfect line. Their footsteps were soft against the marble floor. The door closed behind the last one with a gentle sound. The chamber continued its noise for several more minutes. Then, slowly, some of the delegates began to notice the empty seats. The small section at the back where the humans always sat was vacant now. High Counselor Thyron did not notice for almost an hour. When he finally looked toward the human section, he felt a small flicker of confusion, but he pushed it aside. Humans came and went. They were not important enough to interrupt the real business of the council. Across the galaxy, something much larger was happening. In every space station where humans worked, people were packing their bags. In every trade port where human merchants sold their goods, shops were closing. In every hospital where human doctors treated alien patients, files were being transferred and goodbyes were being said. No one made speeches. No one issued demands. No one explained anything to anyone. The humans simply left. Corey's watched the last human transport ship break orbit from the council homeworld. He had found one of the human engineers, a woman named Sarah, as she was boarding. "Why?" he had asked her. "Why are you all leaving?" "What did we do?" Sarah had looked at him with sad eyes. She had reached out and touched his shoulder gently. Her mouth opened as if she was going to speak. Then she closed it. She smiled a small, sorrowful smile, and she said nothing. She turned and walked onto the ship. The door closed. The engines fired, and she was gone. Corey stood alone on the empty landing platform. The silence around him felt heavy. It pressed against his chest like a weight. He did not understand what was happening, but somewhere deep inside him, in a place he could not name, he felt afraid. The humans had always been there, quiet and overlooked, yes, but always there, always working, always helping. Now they were gone, and they had not said a single word about why. In the council chamber, High Counselor Thyron called for the next item on the agenda. His voice echoed slightly in the large room. He did not notice that it sounded different now. He did not realize that the silence had already begun. 3 weeks passed before the Galactic Council realized something was wrong. High Counselor Thyron stood at the center of the great chamber. His tall blue body was tense with frustration. Around him, delegates from dozens of species were shouting at each other. The usual order of the council had broken down completely. "Explain to me," Thyron demanded, "how the northern trade route has collapsed." The Thalassian trade minister spread his forearms helplessly. "The human merchants have left. All of them. They operated 90% of the cargo ships on that route. Then find other merchants. We've tried. No one else will take those routes. They pass through disputed space. The Korvax and our people have been fighting over those sectors for decades. Human traders were the only ones both sides trusted." Thyron's eyes narrowed. Trusted. They are the youngest species in the galaxy. Why would anyone trust them? The trade minister looked uncomfortable. Because they had no stake in our conflicts. They just wanted to do business. They treated everyone equally. Even us. This was the first crack. But it was not the last. Over the following days, more problems emerged. A communication relay station near the outer colonies went offline. The council sent technicians to repair it, but none of them knew how. The station used old technology that no one had studied in centuries. "Who maintained this station before?" the lead technician asked. The answer came back quickly. A human woman named Dr. Patricia Okonkwo. She had maintained 17 relay stations across 3 sectors. She had been doing it for 30 years. No one had ever thanked her. No one had even known her name until now. The Korvax Collective reported that their border defenses were failing. Not because of attacks, but because the software that controlled them was glitching. The original programmers had made mistakes in the code. Someone had been fixing those mistakes manually for 15 years. A human programmer named James Wu. He had left with all the others. Medical supplies stopped reaching the outer colonies. The ships that carried them had to navigate through unstable space, wormholes that shifted and changed. Most pilots avoided those routes. They were too dangerous. Human pilots had flown them anyway. They had memorized the patterns. They had found safe paths through the chaos. Now there was no one to fly those routes. Corey spent his nights reading reports. He could not sleep anymore. Every day brought new disasters. Every day revealed something else that humans had done. Something that no one had noticed. Something that everyone had taken for granted. He started making a list. It grew longer every hour. Humans had managed food distribution algorithms for 12 species. Humans had mediated minor disputes between colonies that the Council had no time for. Humans had taught classes at universities where no one else wanted to teach. Humans had cleaned the waste processors on space stations. Humans had repaired the old machines that everyone else had forgotten about. They had done the jobs that were too small, too boring, too dangerous, too thankless, and they had done them well. They had done them quietly. They had never complained. Now they were gone. The first food shortage hit the Valkyrie homeworld 6 weeks after the humans left. It was not a big shortage, not yet, but it was enough to cause panic. The Valkyrie had not experienced hunger in 300 years. They did not know how to handle it. Theron ordered an investigation. How had their food supply system failed? It was supposed to be automatic. It was supposed to be perfect. The investigation found the problem quickly. The automated systems had errors. Small errors that accumulated over time. Left alone, those errors would have caused a famine within a decade, but they had never been left alone. A human logistics coordinator named David Chen had been adjusting the algorithms every week. He had been compensating for the errors. He had been keeping the whole system running smoothly. David Chen had not been important enough to have his own office. He had worked from a small desk in a basement. No one in the government had known his name. They knew it now. Theron sat alone in his chambers that night. He stared at the report in his hands. One human. One small, quiet human had been the only thing standing between the Valkyrie people and starvation, and Theron had never heard of him, had never thanked him, had probably walked past him 100 times without ever seeing him. The Council sent a formal message to Earth. It was carefully worded, diplomatic. It requested the return of essential human personnel. It offered better pay, better accommodations, recognition for their work. Earth did not respond. The message sat in a queue, unread, unanswered. The silence was absolute. Theron sent a second message, then a third, then a fourth. Nothing. The humans did not reject the offers. They did not negotiate. They simply did not reply. Corey's found himself standing in the empty section of the council chamber. The human seats gathered dust now. No one had cleaned them. No one knew how to use the human cleaning equipment. He touched one of the chairs. It was simple, plain. The humans had never asked for better furniture. They had never demanded the comfortable seats that other species enjoyed. They had just sat in these hard chairs and done their work. What had it been like for them to sit here year after year? To raise their hands and never be called upon? To watch their ideas ignored and their voices drowned out? Corey's thought about his own behavior. He had liked the humans. He had considered himself their friend. But had he ever actually listened to them? Had he ever fought for them to be heard? He knew the answer. The shame of it burned in his chest. Across the galaxy, the chaos was spreading. The Thalassian Empire and the Korvax Collective moved warships to their shared border. Without human mediators, old hatreds were rising to the surface. A plague broke out on 3 colony worlds. Human doctors had contained it before. Now it spread unchecked. The great machine of galactic civilization was breaking down. And everyone was finally realizing why. Humans had never been the gears of that machine. They had never been the engines or the fuel. They had been something else. Something smaller but more important. They had been the oil. The invisible substance that kept everything moving smoothly. Without it, the gears ground against each other. The engines overheated. The whole machine began to tear itself apart. Thyron called an emergency session of the council. His voice echoed in the great chamber. It sounded hollow now, empty. "We must bring the humans back," he said. "Whatever it takes. Whatever they want. We must bring them back," the delegates muttered and argued. Some agreed. Others were too proud. They insisted that the council did not need humans, that they could solve their problems without those primitive newcomers. But even as they argued, the reports kept coming in. More systems failing, more conflicts erupting, more lives being lost, and from Earth there was only silence. The humans had spoken for 47 years. They had shouted and pleaded and begged to be heard. No one had listened. Now they had stopped speaking. And finally, the galaxy was beginning to hear. 6 months had passed since the humans left. The galaxy had changed beyond recognition. Corys walked through the streets of the council capital. The city had always been clean and bright. Now garbage piled in corners. Lights flickered and went out. The automated systems that kept everything running were failing one by one. The Galactic Stock Exchange had lost 40% of its value. 3 wars had broken out in sectors that used to be peaceful. A plague was spreading through the Outer Rim, killing thousands every day. The quarantine protocols that could have stopped. It were locked in databases that only human doctors knew how to access, but the council could not agree on what to do. High Counselor Thyron had sent message after message to Earth. He had offered money. He had offered power. He had offered anything the humans wanted. Earth never responded. Not a single word. Some delegates said the humans were being childish. They said this silent treatment was proof that humans were too immature to be part of galactic civilization. They should be punished for abandoning their posts. Others said the council should force the humans to return. Send warships to Earth. Make them come back. Show them that the elder races would not be held hostage by their absence. Thyron had considered this option. For one dark moment, he had actually considered it. Then he had read the military reports. Human ships were not advanced. Human weapons were not powerful. But humans had spent 47 years learning every weakness in galactic defenses. They had maintained those defenses. They knew exactly how to break them. A war with humanity would be long and bloody. And even if the council won, they would only get back a workforce of slaves. Slaves did not work with passion. Slaves did not solve problems with creativity. Slaves did not care if the systems they maintained fell apart. The council needed humans who wanted to help. And right now, humans did not want to help at all. Corys had become obsessed with understanding why. He spent every night in the archives, reading about human history. He learned about their wars and their art, their science and their philosophy, their long struggle to build a civilization. On a small blue planet, one word kept appearing in the texts: strike. It was a human concept. When workers were treated badly, they would stop working. They would refuse to do their jobs until their employers listened to them. It was a simple idea, almost primitive, but it was devastatingly effective. The humans were not being childish. They were not abandoning their responsibilities. They were on strike. They were using the oldest weapon in their history: silence. Corys shared his findings with Thyron. The High Counselor listened with growing unease. "They planned this," Thyron said slowly. "They planned this for years." "I do not think so," Corys replied. "I think they simply reached a breaking point. They could not take being ignored anymore. Then what do they want? We have offered them everything." Corys thought about this for a long time. "Perhaps," he said carefully, "they do not want to be offered things. Perhaps they want something that cannot be given, only earned." Thyron did not understand. He was used to negotiation, to deals and trades and compromises. This was different. This was something his people had never faced before. The Korvax Collective sent secret envoys to Earth. They bypassed the Council entirely. They were desperate for engineers to repair their defense systems. They offered the humans exclusive trade deals, citizenship, land. Anything the envoys were received politely. The humans gave them food and shelter. They showed them the beautiful cities of Earth. They treated them with kindness and respect. But when the envoys asked about returning to work for the Korbaks, the humans simply smiled and said nothing. The envoys returned home empty-handed. The Thalassians tried a different approach. They sent their most skilled diplomats, their best speakers, their most persuasive voices. Ambassador Alina Vasquez met with them personally. She listened to every word they said. She nodded at the right moments. She seemed engaged and interested. When they finished speaking, they waited for her response. She said nothing. She just kept looking at them with calm, patient eyes. The Thalassian diplomats did not know what to do. They were trained to argue and debate. They knew how to counter every possible response, but they had no defense against silence. They talked more. They made new offers. They changed their approach again and again. Alina just watched and listened. After 3 hours, the lead diplomat broke down. "What do you want?" he shouted. "Just tell us what you want." Alina tilted her head slightly. Something flickered in her eyes. Sadness, perhaps? Or maybe disappointment. She did not answer. The diplomats left Earth feeling confused and afraid. They had faced hostile enemies. They had survived wars and assassinations. Nothing had prepared them for a woman who simply would not speak. Theron decided to go to Earth himself. It was an extreme measure. A high counselor had not left the capital for a diplomatic mission in over a century. But these were extreme times. His ship landed in a human city called Geneva. It was beautiful. Green parks and clean streets, children playing in fountains, life going on as if nothing had happened. The humans were not suffering. They had not fallen into chaos without the council. They were fine. Better than fine, perhaps. Theron was escorted to a large building with white walls. Inside, a chamber waited for him. It was full of human representatives. Men and women of all ages. They sat in neat rows, their hands folded, their faces calm. They said nothing. Theron waited for someone to greet him. No one did. They just watched him with quiet eyes. He cleared his throat. "I am High Counselor Theron of the Valkyrie. I come on behalf of the Galactic Council to discuss the return of human personnel to their posts." Silence. "We are prepared to make significant concessions. Better treatment. Higher status. A stronger voice in council affairs." Silence. "We acknowledge that humanity has been ... undervalued. We wish to correct this mistake." Silence. Theron felt sweat forming on his blue skin. He was not used to this. He was used to being in control, to being the one who decided when conversations ended. "Will you not speak to me?" he asked. His voice cracked slightly. Alina Vasquez was sitting in the front row. She looked at him with those same calm, sad eyes. Then she glanced at an empty chair across from the human seats. An invitation. Not to speak. To sit. To wait. To listen. Theron understood then. For the first time in his 200-year life, he understood. The humans did not want him to talk. They wanted him to hear. But hear what? What could he hear when no one was speaking? He looked at the silent faces around him, at the patience in their eyes, at the dignity in their stillness, and slowly, terribly, he began to realize that the silence itself was the message. Everything he needed to hear was in what was not being said. He just had to figure out how to listen. "High Counselor." Theron stood in the chamber of silence. 100 human faces watched him without expression. The weight of their eyes pressed against him like a physical force. He had prepared a speech, 20 pages of carefully crafted words, promises and offers and diplomatic phrases designed to bring the humans back to their posts. Now those words felt hollow, empty, wrong. The humans did not want his speech. They wanted something else, something he was only beginning to understand. Theron looked at the empty chair across from the human representatives. Alina Vasquez had gestured toward it, an invitation to sit, to wait for a moment. His pride screamed at him to refuse. He was the High Counselor. the most powerful person in the galaxy. He did not sit and wait for lesser species. He commanded, he decided. He spoke, and others listened. But look where that had brought him. Look where that had brought everyone. Slowly, painfully, Thyron walked to the empty chair. He lowered himself into it. The seat was hard and uncomfortable, just like the seats humans had used in the council chamber for 47 years. He sat, and he waited. The first hour was torture. Thyron was not built for silence. His mind raced with things he wanted to say, arguments he wanted to make. But every time he opened his mouth, he saw the patient eyes of the humans, and he closed it again. The second hour was worse. He began to feel trapped, angry. He wanted to stand up and leave, to declare this whole thing a waste of time. But something held him in place, some small voice in the back of his mind that whispered, "This is what they felt. For 47 years, this is what they felt." The third hour, something changed. The anger faded. The restlessness quieted. And in the silence, memories began to surface. He remembered a council meeting 15 years ago. A human delegate had stood to speak about trade routes. Thyron had been reviewing reports on his screen. He had not looked up once. He remembered a dinner party where he had been introduced to the human ambassador. He had shaken her hand quickly and turned to speak with the Thalassian minister. He had not even learned her name. He remembered a young human engineer who had fixed a problem with the climate system in his office. Thyron had not thanked her. He had not even acknowledged her presence. She had been invisible to him so many moments. So many small cruelties, not done with malice. Done with something worse, indifference. Thyron closed his eyes. He saw the human section of the council chamber, the small seats at the back, the raised hands that were never called upon, the voices that were drowned out by louder, older species. He saw generations of humans coming to the council with hope, working hard, contributing, trying to be heard, and generation after generation being ignored, being dismissed, being treated like children who had nothing important to say, the silent year historians would call this time. But the real silence had come before. The silence of a galaxy that refused to listen. Tears formed in Thyron's eyes. He did not try to stop them. When the third hour ended, he began to speak, but not the speech he had prepared. Something else. Something raw and honest and painful. "I remember a proposal," he said quietly, "about a planet called Vareth 6. 3 million people were starving. Humans had found a way to save them. I was checking my messages when they presented it. I did not hear a single word. The humans watched him in silence, but something shifted in their eyes. A flicker of attention. I remember a solution to the Thalassian-Korvax border dispute. Humans had worked on it for months. I called it naive. I did not read past the first paragraph, took a shaky breath. I remember a request for equal speaking time. Humans asked to be heard as much as any other species. I laughed. We all laughed. Thyron looked around the chamber. At each face, each pair of eyes, "I do not know all of your names. I should know them. I should have learned them years ago. David Chen, Patricia Okonkwo, James Wu. I know these names now because I was forced to learn them, because their absence nearly destroyed us." He stood up from the hard chair. His legs ached from sitting so long. "I am sorry," he said. "I am truly, deeply sorry. Not because we need you. We do need you, but that is not why I'm sorry. I am sorry because you deserved better. You deserved to be heard, and we failed you." The chamber remained silent, but the quality of the silence had changed. It was softer now, less like a wall and more like an open door. Alina Vasquez rose from her seat. She walked toward Thyron slowly. Her footsteps echoed in the quiet room. She stopped in front of him. For a long moment, she just looked at his face, at the tears still wet on his blue skin, at the genuine pain in his ancient eyes. Then she spoke. The first words any human had said to the council in 6 months. "We never wanted to be heard over everyone else," she said. "We just wanted to be heard at all." Thyron nodded. He understood now. Finally, truly understood. "What do you want?" he asked. "What can I do to make this right?" Alina reached into her jacket. She pulled out a single document. It was old and worn. She had carried it with her for a year. She placed it in Theron's hands. He looked down at it. The proposal for Vareth 6, the same proposal that had been ignored. The same plan that could have saved 3 million lives. "This," Elena said. "We wanted this. We still do. Do you hear us now?" Theron held the document like it was precious, like it was sacred. "I hear you," he whispered. "I hear you." On the council homeworld, Corys watched the broadcast on a public screen. Around him, aliens of every species stood in stunned silence. They watched their High Counselor weep and apologize. They heard the human ambassador speak for the first time in half a year. Corys felt tears rolling down his own face. He did not wipe them away. The galaxy had been deaf for so long. Deaf by choice, deaf by arrogance, deaf by the simple cruelty of not caring enough to listen. Now, finally, it was learning to hear. But learning was only the first step. The harder work was still to come. The work of proving that this time would be different. That the words spoken today would lead to actions tomorrow. Alina knew this. Theron knew this. Everyone watching knew this. The silence had done its job. It had forced the galaxy to pay attention. Now came the real test. What would they do with that attention? How would they change? Only time would tell. But for the first time in 47 years, there was hope. 1 year had passed since the humans left. Now they were coming back. The council chamber looked different than it had before. The human seats were no longer at the back of the room. They had been moved to the center, equal in position to every other species. The seats themselves were new, comfortable, a small thing, but a meaningful one. Ambassador Elena Vasquez walked through the great doors for the first time in 12 months. Behind her came the human delegates. They walked with their heads high and their shoulders straight. The weight they had carried for 47 years had finally been lifted. The chamber fell silent as they entered. But it was not the old silence. Not the silence of being ignored. This was the silence of respect, of attention, of a galaxy that had learned to listen. High Counselor Theron stood at the center of the chamber. He looked older than he had a year ago. The crisis had aged him, but there was something new in his eyes. Wisdom, perhaps, or humility. Things that had been missing before. "Welcome back," he said. "We have missed you." Lena smiled. It was a real smile, warm and genuine. "We have missed being here." There was no grand ceremony, no dramatic speeches. The humans simply took their seats, and the council session began. But everyone felt the difference. When a human raised their hand to speak, the chamber went quiet. When a human made a proposal, other delegates took notes. The change was subtle but profound. The first order of business was Vareth 6, the planet that had started everything. 3 million people had been starving a year ago. Many had died during the silent year, but many more had survived because human aid workers had gone there anyway. Even without council support. Now the council voted unanimously to commit full resources to Vareth 6. Ships loaded with food and medicine and building materials were already on their way. The planet would not just survive, it would thrive. Alina watched the vote with quiet satisfaction. This was what she had wanted. Not power, not revenge, just this. The simple act of being heard, of having her people's ideas taken seriously. Corys had been given a new position. He was now the first alien, liaison to Earth. His job was to make sure communication between humans and the Council never broke down again. He took the responsibility seriously. In the months since the humans returned, he had visited Earth 3 times. He had walked through human cities and eaten human food. He had learned human games and read human books. He was beginning to understand these strange, stubborn, wonderful people. Humans were not like other species. They were short-lived and fragile. They had no natural weapons. They could not survive in extreme environments. By every measure that the galaxy used, They should have been insignificant, but they had something else. Something that could not be measured. A kind of quiet determination. A refusal to give up. A belief that every voice mattered, even the smallest one. The silent year had proven this beyond any doubt. Humans had shown the galaxy what happened when they stopped helping. But they had also shown what happened when they started again. The healing had begun immediately. Trade routes reopened. Conflicts were resolved. The plague in the Outer Rim was contained. Humans had not come back demanding special treatment. They had simply come back and started working, just as they always had. The difference was that now everyone noticed. The Council implemented new rules. Reflection periods before every major vote. Time when no one was allowed to speak. Time when everyone had to think about what they had heard. It felt strange at first. Some delegates complained that it was a waste of time, but slowly they began to see the value. Decisions made after reflection were better decisions. Arguments that seemed important in the heat of the moment became less important after a few minutes of silence. The council became more thoughtful, more careful, more wise. 1 year after the humans had left, a ceremony was held to mark the anniversary. Delegates from every species gathered to remember what had happened and to commit to doing better. Alina stood at the podium. The chamber was full. Every seat was taken. Every eye was on her. My grandmother was a teacher, she began. She worked in a small school in a city called Snow Hollow. Every day, she stood in front of children and tried to help them learn. She was not famous. She was not powerful. But she changed lives. The chamber listened in perfect silence. She used to tell me something. She said that the loudest voice in the room is rarely the wisest. The wisest voice is often the one who knows when words are not enough. Alina looked out at the assembly, at the alien faces that had once ignored her, at the colleagues who had become friends. We did not leave because we were angry. We left because we had run out of words. We had said everything we could say. We had tried everything we could try, and nothing worked. So we stopped speaking. We let our silence say what our voices could not. She paused. The moment stretched out. Silence is not weakness. Silence is not surrender. Sometimes silence is the strongest thing you can do. It forces people to confront the noise they have been making. It makes them hear the echoes of their own voices. And sometimes, in that silence, they finally understand what they could not hear before. Thyron sat in the front row. His eyes were bright with emotion. He had changed more than anyone over the past year. He had become a different leader, a better one. When Alina finished speaking, she stepped down from the podium. Thyron met her at the bottom of the stairs. "I have been thinking," he said. "All those years we spoke over you. What were you actually saying?" Alina looked at him with those calm, patient eyes. The same eyes that had watched him struggle in the chamber of silence. The same eyes that had seen his tears and accepted his apology. "Exactly what we said with our silence," she replied. "We are here. We matter. And we will not beg to be seen." Thyron nodded slowly. He understood now. Truly understood. "We hear you now," he said. Alina reached out and clasped his arm. A gesture of friendship, of forgiveness, of hope. That is all we ever wanted. The ceremony ended. The delegates filed out of the chamber, but something remained behind. A feeling in the air. A change that could not be undone. The galaxy had learned something precious during the silent year. It had learned that the Small's voices often had the most important things to say. It had learned that listening was harder than speaking, but far more valuable. It had learned that silence could be louder than any shout. Outside the chamber, Corey stood with a group of human friends. They were laughing about something. Their joy was infectious. Other species joined them, drawn by the warmth. This was what the galaxy could be. Not separate peoples fighting over power, but one community working together. Listening to each other, valuing every voice. The humans had taught them this lesson. Not through speeches or demands, through the simple act of walking away and waiting to be missed. The silent year was over, but its lessons would last forever. And somewhere, in a small school in Snow Hollow, a teacher named Alina Vasquez smiled. Her grandmother would have been proud.